Cop here now for about 21 years. I'm also from Bloomington Normal, lived here my whole life, and worked all over the police department, gang unit, drugs, detective. I've been a sergeant now for 9 years, and I'm now doing what I absolutely love and am enjoying the most since I've been a cop here is actually community engagement. I could go into a long spiel about what that is and why we do that and one of the main things, but today we're just going to talk about one spot. There's a presentation that I've got here for you today. I'm going to give you the fast and dirty version of it, but it's something that it kind of falls into kind of how I founded or helped found the community engagement unit along with the chief, because there's a gap in policing that since we're just with my 21 years of experience, that has always bothered me and ways of which we could do better. And one of these ways since I got into this unit is one of the spots, and primarily kind of came up with this thinking about our immigrant population and people new to this country and don't understand at all how police work. But there's a lot of people that fall under that umbrella on somewhere on the spectrum. They're just on the far end of the spectrum where they have almost hardly any idea about what to do and how to interact with police. But there's a lot of people out there that no matter what you do, it can create a lot of anxiety or fear whenever you have to deal with the police in any way, shape, or form. So I came up with this idea of this presentation to kind of go over the general ways in which anyone could interact with the police and how we can reduce that fear and anxiety for both the citizen and for the officers as well, so we can all work harmoniously and together. And so it's called Your Policing You. And before I came up with it, or this kind of quasi-finalized product of it, I'm sure it will always change as I get new ideas, which I'm hoping will come from some of you. If anybody has any ideas, please pass them forward on other things that I can add to it or change, alter, that you think might be just come across a little better. But I'd reached out to my friends, community contacts from the Immigration Project, the Islamic Center, the Hindu population, the Congolese population, African-American population, and just asking for different ways and things they would like me to add in here. And so this finished product that I have now is what you're going to see with that. So I actually had just given this presentation just yesterday at Mayor's Manor to the people there the residents there, and it went really well to a small group there of about 10. But anyway, all these presentations, and we offer a whole bunch, the community engagement does, on active shooter drills for businesses and places of worship. We offer one that I started doing recently. It was a bullying one for kids. I've got ones on, man, I'm drawing a blank now. The community engagement unit. I go to ISU and actually talk about how to get hired at the Bloomington Police Department, some of their professional development. But I'm gonna go ahead here and hope my tech works. I'm gonna try sharing the screen and see how this works. So it looks like this screen here. See, are you seeing what you're supposed to?
Yep.
Perfect. Look at that, Toy. We did it on round.
We did.
All right. You're policing you. And so the purpose of this class, and like I said, I'm gonna give you the fast and dirty one. So if you could just kind of save your comments to the end, I'll go through this real quick, but in a longer one, this takes about an hour. And so I'm gonna try and get this done in like 20 minutes if I can to go through this. And then, so just jot down your questions or comments you might have as it goes on, and then we'll just hit them up at the end. But this is just more of just to give you a general idea of what we have to offer. And if you have any groups that you think would benefit from this, please let me know. And like I said, we're the police, we're free. We belong to you, we work for you. So let me know. Main purpose of the class, learning how and why police do what they do. And if anybody doesn't recognize him there, if you haven't met him, that's Chief Jamal Symington. He's our chief. It's been here for about the last year and a half. And I'm not trying to talk bad about any other chief I've had before, but I can easily say the best chief I've ever had in my 21 years, and it's not even close. He's wonderful, and one of his primary jobs since he got here, he's made it no bones about it, that is community engagement, that and transparency with the community are like two of his things he wants to see moving forward. So reducing anxiety and fear, and then also promoting cooperation for a better, safer community for everyone. The most time, and this is true for why I wanted to have the community engagement unit created in all by itself, but there's two times when anyone is usually going to run into the police or have an interaction with the police in your lifetime. And it's usually either an enforcement action is being taken, those are your traffic stops, pedestrian stops, an arrest, an investigation of some type, or a tragedy has just occurred. Those are your deaths, your crashes, you're a victim of a crime yourself. Both of those are absolutely horrible environments to actually have a relationship or any type of dialogue, conversation with anybody. And so you never really get to break that barrier with a police officer and ask questions that you might want to, or just be friendly with each other. And so this is like, who are we at Bloomington PD? Just kind of, we're family members, friends, community members, human beings. And actually, while I'm thinking of this right here, I'm seeing soft baseball right there. I have to mention this, especially Langston, if you're still listening. I can't believe you did not brag about he and my daughter both are on the same softball team that he generously is the sponsor of with his business. And our girls won the championship this year for BNGSA. So he absolutely so that put us, I think, both at a 10, even though he's on a boat, he gets like a 10.5. There, I see you on there. Yes. Congratulations to your daughter. They had a great time.
Yeah, awesome. That was an awesome memory that those girls made that day.
Yeah, we're human, so that kind of dives right in. We're community members, human beings, just like you. So there's Langston. We'd see each other out there every day at those ballparks, and he had seen me and recognized me from other community engagement things we'd had that the Reentry Council had put together. And so that's who we are. I mean, behind these things, we have the same families. Our kids play together. We do these things. We interact. And so these pictures here that you're seeing, I just go through them real quick. The Mark First invited us to their parade they had downtown Bloomington last year. That's Chief, we're now retired Assistant Chief Bays, getting a hug there. It was one of his favorite days he said, in his entire career. This is Mount Pisgah that invited us out to their annual picnic. It was actually a normal, but yeah, they invited us, the chief and I, actually my wife and daughter came out there too. And this is the chief just right before he lost at musical chairs. They did not care that he's the chief of police. They knocked him on his butt right after you see in this picture here. This is Officer Kerry Johnson, also a local Bloomington BHS grad here at one of the Pride events here at in front of the bistro. You've got the Miracle League games, softball games. They had us at the end, the last, that's Officer Parsley. He and I and the chief came out there at the end of the year last year. They invited us out there again this year, and I was unfortunately on vacation, but the chief threw out the first pitch. This is at St. Mary's Church down here. It's Officer Vasquez and me down there at their Kermesse festival that they invited us to. And Socorro Alvarez, I'm sure some of you will recognize her. She just retired from Western Avenue Community Center. Absolutely amazing person. Her son and I used to play baseball together too in Little League. But so with BPD, just to give you a little rundown of who we are, there's about 128 officers in our department. We got chief, 3 assistant chiefs, patrols. We do 3 different shifts of 8-hour shifts, and each one's got a lieutenant and 3 sergeants. Then we've got our detective bureau, CID, crime scene detectives, vice, street crimes unit, and then we've got our SWAT team and CNU, which is crisis negotiation, like if there's a hostage, barricaded subject, people that try to talk them out. And then newly created last year is the community engagement unit. Now, this is something that a part that I normally wouldn't have thought to, I definitely wouldn't have thought of this on my own, but this was something that was asked for by the Islamic Center because they have a lot of immigrants here. And so as part of their congregation, and they didn't understand the jurisdictions. So part of what I talk about is breaking down how there are 4 different kind of police officer departments here in this just Bloomington normal area, but when you would need to call one. Like if you got, I live in Bloomington, but my car got broken into when I was shopping at Target, who do I call? And there's some very easy answers that I won't go into right here, but we kind of break that down to help them out because that would be confusing if you were new to the area. Other things that we, so all the topics that get covered in this program: traffic stops, vehicle crashes, citations, arrests, victim of a crime, when and how to call the police, complaints and thanking an officer, and school resource officers. Now that is another one that came from the Islamic Center. They, again, because of the immigrant issue, that they said this is completely foreign to a lot of them, no pun intended. But they, in other countries, they don't typically have police officers in the schools, and they're like, are we at a dangerous school? Is this unusual? What is their role there? So we talk about that too, because I could definitely see how that would be a little disconcerting if you're coming from another place and you see a police at your school. So traffic stops, break it down real quick. Like I said, it's the fast and dirty version, but I break this down and take plenty of time for questions throughout all this. So the first thing to do, slow down, pull over safely, usually to the right side of the road, and then staying in your vehicle unless told otherwise. This is one that came out of a Hindu town hall that the chief and I went to last year, where they had told us in India, it is typical for them to get out of the police car, or I'm sorry, they get out of their own car and walk back to the police car. So, and I never had that happen to me in my career, but I went and I was bringing that up with some of the other officers. And there were multiple officers I've talked to that, yes, somebody had gotten out of the driver's seat as soon as they stopped and then ran back to the police car with their hands up. They're like, what is going on? That's obviously disconcerting for the police. And so, yeah, we're trying to get them to all understand, please stay in your car. and then keep your hands visible. This is the first thing like they teach us in the academy, and we go through constantly over and over in all police safety stuff. There's only one thing that can hurt a police officer, and it's hands. So that's the number one thing we're always taught to watch for. Like, you're not going to shoot me with your feet or stab me with your feet. It's these hands. So when you're in the car and thinking about it from a police officer's perspective, how can I make that cop relax and not see me as a threat? It's keeping your hands that's on that steering wheel visible. If you're going to reach for something, tell the officer where you're about to reach and why before you do it. And so, yeah, roll the window down. The officer is going to greet you. And by our SOP, they're supposed to identify themselves and then explain the reason for the stop to you. Now, obviously, sometimes it doesn't always go that way, depending on circumstances but that's what they're supposed to do. And then they're going to ask for two major things usually: driver's license and proof of insurance. Sometimes they're asking for registration, but usually all that we can look up on our own on our computer, and it'll pop up when we run your plate. But proof of insurance, which you can keep on your phone now, it doesn't have to be that paper copy. If you have the digital copy on your phone, that is perfectly valid. Another thing is then you're going to get either a citation or a warning. Now, depending on the officer or the seriousness of the infraction, there is a lot of discretion in there and what that's going to be. I will tell you, I don't know if you guys saw the recent, I think it was this year, like maybe February, there was a WGLT article just showing like the differences between Bloomington and normal PD. And we had almost the same amount of traffic stops. I think they had several 100% more tickets written than us. It's just a philosophical difference in our kind of departments to some degree. And so very often, more often than not in Bloomington, if you get pulled over, and I teach de-escalation for all of our officers as well. And that's actually another one of the classes I give. I have a de-escalation class for private citizens too. That's about 45 minutes long. But with that, when I teach all my officers, I try to really emphasize empathy. That's the cornerstone of the entire class is that. And so a lot of that is tickets are really expensive. They're like $175 now for your general moving violations. I make really good money here as a sergeant of BPD. I'll never complain about the pay here. 175 will still hurt my monthly budget. It will. But I try to get my officers now. Imagine that for somebody who works minimum wage. What is $175 going to do? That could be catastrophic. Or if you tow their vehicle, all these things. So it's like maybe the stop itself for the most people is the correction. It's like enough to get them. It is for most people to get them to slow down. I wasn't paying attention. I was distracted. Got my kids in the car. I'm late for work. Slow down. The last thing we want is anybody getting hurt and getting into a crash. That's our number one focus for why we do these traffic stops. So we try to really emphasize not really always doing a ticket. And then the officer is going to release you from the scene after those things are done, whether they made the decision to write the ticket or the warning. Then you're still not done. You want to make sure you pull safely back into traffic. Use that turn signal. Be looking all around because you're probably a little rattled. Your heart's going after being pulled over. You're a little scared, sad, maybe angry after getting a ticket or relieved after not getting one. But now you got to pull back in, and you don't want to do that haphazardly and get into a crash right there. So then some other things just to know about traffic stops. These are some of so police can legally order you in and out of the vehicle. And I've got the Supreme Court case there just so it's clear, because that's where we get into a lot of arguments with people. We can have you step out. And there's a lot of other safety reasons that are in there, but even on a regular traffic stop, that could be very frightening for people, especially if you're terrified of police. And it's like, I at least have the safety of my car. I feel comfortable here, especially I'm thinking like women late at night, one-on-one. This is legally something they can do, but you can also legally record the police. I'm going to kind of jumping ahead of myself there, but you can always record the police officers on these traffic stops with your cell phone, or your friend can that's in there as well. And you can also wait to pull over to a safe place whenever you're going. You can recommend, if you're on Veterans Parkway, I'd much prefer if you let the traffic stop go or before you pull over, you keep going for a little bit, use your turn signal on and slow down so that we know that you're watching us. But then you can pull off into a side road or into a parking lot, a well-lit place for you. You do not have to pull over in the dead dark in the middle of the night. But we can order you out of the vehicle or order you to stay in if you're trying to get out. In order for a canine to come, that officer does need to have reasonable suspicion. Now, reasonable suspicion is a very low threshold for us to have, but it has to be something they can articulate. And it can't just be, well, I pulled somebody over and I think they might have drugs. That's not articulable suspicion or reasonable suspicion. There has to be something else that they have that they're going to call for a canine. But if that canine does indicate, that is probable cause for us to search them and the car. and anybody that's in it, and we are going to have to order you out of the vehicle in order to do that search. The dog it's not a real search and not a real sniff if the people are in the car. So we have to have everyone out of the car, and then the dog is going to run around an empty car with the doors closed. And then that's when if they indicate on that, then we're still going to search anybody that was in the car and that car. Other things, so canine alert, vehicle search. Other things that we can search too is plain view. So, so if there's an open can of alcohol inside that car, you can't have that. Then we can search the car. Not necessarily the people though, unless that one person's holding an empty can, then that makes them that person, we can search them, but not the car, or not the other people, the passengers. But if we see drugs inside the car, same thing, we can search the car. If there's a blunt that's left over, even though marijuana is legal, there are very strict stipulations on how you can transport it in a car back and forth. And so just keep in mind that odor, again, still right now, the odor of marijuana, and this is where it's going to get tricky eventually in the courts because it's legal to possess it by people that are 21 years and older. You still are supposed to have scent proof packages that you buy from the dispensaries, and that's how you can transport just those back and forth, unopened, back and forth. You're not supposed to be transporting opened packages or your own. If it's in a plastic baggie, that's completely not right. So in theory, they're supposed to have no odor. Now I can tell you too, I mean, anybody that's been to a dispensary or been around anybody that's had the dispensary, they all smell, even the outsides. I mean, it's kind of just those things. I can tell you that at Bloomington PD, though, since the law has changed and it's become legalized, we have been much more lenient towards the whole marijuana thing. As long as you're not, I don't want to say anything possible, but it's like, for the most part, if anybody is trying to do what they're supposed to do, or they've got your small user amounts, we could really care less. There's other things that could always play into that, but really it's like we've tried to be very lenient with the whole marijuana thing because that's where the courts want us to go, and the public does as well. Police can request an ID from anyone in the vehicle. So if you're driving, you get pulled over by police, the police can ask for an ID from anyone, but nobody but the driver has to provide their ID to anybody. So I want to get that very clear, because especially with kids, a lot of times they think that it's hard to say no to a police officer. I'm sure you feel guilty doing that, but that is absolutely your right to refuse that. Unless, let's say you're the front seat passenger and you're not wearing your seatbelt, then we can force you to provide ID because you now are you've committed an offense. Or somebody else has committed an offense in that car. If you haven't, though, and you've done absolutely nothing, you're just a passenger in the vehicle, there's no right that the police have to force you to provide ID on yourself. But they can ask, but you do not have to give it. So you're not required. If you don't have a license, this is more like for the immigrant population that I would kind of focus with this, but if you don't have a license, please don't drive. If you don't have insurance, please don't drive. Because it can lead to arrests, citations, and tow fees, and they are expensive. So, like, just so you know, right now, if you have driving with no valid license or a suspended license, it's a $250 tow fee to get your car back from the Bloomington Police Department, plus a $10 administrative fee, plus the $175 ticket if you only got one ticket, plus Joe's fee, which is another $175. Not even going into court costs and reinstatement costs. So all told, you're looking at upwards around $1,000. Very, very expensive. Please don't. Insurance tickets too can run over $400 or $500 or even more if you don't have insurance at the time of your traffic stop. Next, we're jumping into, like I said, I'm trying to go fast and dirty here. Vehicle crashes. If there's no injury and only minor damage, take a picture with your cell phone. Having cell phones everywhere now is phenomenal for both police work and just protecting yourself in everything you do. Take a picture of your crash, like the whole the scene. Like, think of it as like you're a photographer. Get a picture of like the location of where you're at, the street lights, the stop signs, whatever might else be a good evidence for you. And this is more for your insurance company than police. I'm just trying to give this advice for you so you can protect yourselves. So take a picture of that. Take a picture of the damage to both your car and their car, so they can't try to claim that there was more damage that you caused than there actually was. Then find a safer location, because if it's we're talking about no injury and minor damage. Try to pull up. You don't have to wait there. Let's say it's at Veterans Parkway in Clearwater. Terrible location if you've got minor damage, no injuries. You're causing more risk to yourself and everyone else in the street by waiting there in the middle of the intersection. Pull over instead into a Hy-Vee parking lot there, or Burger King across the street, and wait there for us, and then call the police. And then you can also take the pictures there. And you take pictures also of, I recommend getting the driver's license of the other person. Call non-emergency dispatch. For those of you who don't know, you can Google all this, but I've got the numbers there anyway. For Bloomington, it's this. For Normal, it's that. But either way, if you call one of those, you're calling the wrong one, the wrong place, they'll transfer you over. You don't have to worry about learning it all. But those are good numbers, though, to save in your phone and at your house and place of work. So if there's, again, no injuries, still minor damage, photos to damageable vehicles, insurance cards, and IDs. And so if the damage is under $1,500, or that's what we kind of think it is when we get there, it's just a bumper, little fender bender, we're going to send you home. You do not need a police report. And so you just would report it to your insurance companies individually, you and that other person. So that's why you would take photographs of all the damage, insurance cards, and the other person's ID, and then you'll transfer that all over to your insurance company. If there is an injury or serious damage, then stay in your car. Don't get out, especially if you feel any kind of whiplash, anything, stay there, wait for us. Call 911. This is not a non-emergency thing. If you got serious injury and also serious damage, call us on 911, report it, or hopefully there's somebody else. If you're the one that's hurt, hopefully somebody else is taking care of that for you, because you're going to be in a state of shock. But call 911, wait for first responders to come. Don't get out of your cars. Law enforcement, if you are still just kind of shook up and you got damage, you're not too bad. The things we are going to need before we release you from the scene, everything. So if you want to start getting this while you're waiting the few minutes till we get there, we're still going to need your driver's license and insurance. So start getting that together. Another thing too is to start thinking about what towing company you're going to want if your car is not going to be able to stay in the road. Because if you can't make a decision or you're injured or something, we're just going to call our tow company that we use, contracted through the city of Joe's, and they're just going to tow it straight to Joe's. But you're not going to be able to get your stuff out of it until you pay them the towing fee. Otherwise, you can have Joe's or some other company, Brown's, whoever else, Mauer, tow it to wherever you want, maybe to a mechanic's place that you want, but you'll have to pay them on the spot with your credit card. So just one of those little things to be thinking about. It's nice to know this now, and so you have it in your head. Maybe think now, like, if I ever get into a crash, where would I want this car to go? And do I have a credit card on me? And will I, because you're gonna have to pay for it right then. And what towing company I prefer? If you don't have a preference, we'll just call Joe's. It's just simple. They're very quick and fast for us. You're gonna want to then take your valuables from the vehicle, because anything that you have in it, especially because there's a few things that the towing companies are required to let you get out, and it's going to be like medications, some like baby stuff, like if you got your diapers and car seat and things like that in there, your wallet and ID. They are required to let you get in those there, but they're really strict about it. They're not going to let you get anything else. So if you got work tools in there, your work laptop, things like that, they don't care. They're going to make you pay before they're going to ever let you get any of that stuff out. So before that crash goes, and I know your mind's not there, take any value. Plus, it might get stolen. They technically are liable, but are you going to want to go through that whole process? And some stuff's irreplaceable. Take any valuables out of that car with you, or give it to somebody else that you have that's on the scene with you. Next, we're going on to traffic stop citations. And this is one of the things I've just gone through in my career that I wanted to bring up, because these things can be confusing. So signing the citation is not an admission of guilt. And when I first started, police were able to arrest people for not signing the citation, as that was an obstruction of justice. Luckily, like I think it was like 10 years ago, the governor changed that law. It's one of the stupidest things ever that we had, that it just caused friction and problems, and it's not a big deal. It's like, you should not be able to force people to have to sign a ticket. So luckily, that is no longer an enforceable law. So you can choose not to sign if you don't want to. It really doesn't make a deal. It's basically just saying, I got the ticket. You're admitting no guilt by signing it. But whatever, if you don't want to, you do not have to. And then you can, to plead not guilty, make sure you show up for that court date. Because if you don't, there could be a warrant out for your arrest. But if you want to plead guilty, then you need to fill out the back portion, the bottom portion on the blue citation that the officer is going to give you. And you want to send the appropriate payment for this appropriate time. And I'll tell a real quick short story on this, because I had one, and it doubles into the empathy kind of thing I was talking about before. I backed up an officer a couple of years ago who had a woman pulled over on a traffic stop. And he was like, man, Sarge, I really wish I didn't have to write this ticket and tow her vehicle. I'm like, well, tell me what's going on. He's like, well, she got a ticket a year ago from Normal for talking on her cell phone. And she admitted. But it's the first ticket she's ever gotten her whole career, and he verified that. And then do it on time, okay. And so then he's like, she's never had a ticket before, so she didn't know what to do. She was too confused and kind of scared when the officer was explaining to her how to pay the ticket. So when she got I think he's accidentally got his mic on.
Hold on, let me mute that person.
Okay. And so when she went to go pay the ticket, she just contacted the clerk's office and said, hey, I just want to plead guilty. Do I have to show up in court or can I just mail this ticket in? They're like, oh yeah, just mark guilty and mail it in. What they didn't tell her, and she still didn't read the fine print and was just a little new to this and scared, is that she didn't mail in the payment. So she didn't send a check with it. So again, the clerk's office doesn't care. It's not their job. They suspended her immediately. And it's like, it's not the intent. So yeah, they don't send you like a message back like, hey, you forgot to send the check in. Nope, suspended. Then she had recently moved from one apartment to the other. She never got the notification that she'd been suspended. She had no clue. I believed her. The officer believed her. And so I told him, I was like, okay, weigh this out. Is society better served by us towing her car and ending up with about $1,000 in fines on something that looks like more of a clerical error and a misunderstanding from a nice person who's done nothing else wrong in her no history of crime ever in her life? Or does she deserve a warning? And he's like, I'd love to give her a warning. Do that. He's like, I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm like, no, you're able to articulate all the reasons why she probably did not understand what was going on with the system. And it was just a mistake. And so I was like, I will back you up 10 times out of 10 on this. You're perfectly fine. So he did. Her dad came and picked up the vehicle because she didn't have a license. He drove it away and she left with just a warning. And then she had still to go reinstate her license. But again, these are the things that I've seen it happen many times in my career. Where a lot of times, Illinois too, something else. Illinois, I found out, is the second state behind Florida in the percentage of drivers who are suspended. So there's kind of a little bit of seem like a money-making venture that's tied in with our laws and the way that it works. And we're kind of punishing a lot of people that maybe don't deserve to be punished, or especially as harshly as it is. So other thing is ordinance violations. If the fine is paid, so an ordinance is a city ticket. So it's like sometimes, especially one of the most common ones you see in here, you see them in red, like we have the marijuana ones that are on there. But also a lot of times these are the ones we'll have for downtown, where people who are a minor in a bar, things like that. Sometimes it's a battery if it's not enough to arrest somebody. They're not really wanting to press charges. Disorderly conduct is a very common one. Curfew, challenge to fight, we use downtown a lot instead of having to do a full report, things like that. But anyway, with these, they're like giant parking tickets. As long as you pay them, they're not on your criminal record. They disappear. So it's like they're just city tickets and the money goes directly to the city. But that way there's not a police report's usually not written with these. With some of those ones in the red, we have to, but other ones they're not. And so as long as you pay them, they go away. But still, you want to make sure you pay them because it can turn into a criminal charge if you skip the court dates and then they issue a warrant for your arrest and blah, 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 starts piling up in you that way. But to contest an ordinance violation, you will, there's the Osborne room is the upstairs room we have here, conference room at the police department. You come at the date and time that they provide here. So it's, I don't know if you can see it, they're right in the middle. Your administrative court date is scheduled for blank, blank, blank. So they're on that date and time. That's where you go to contest it if you feel that you were wronged and you'd have a chance to plead your case. Otherwise, you can just pay it. And how to pay it, just follow the very simple instruction, much easier to read than the back of the state citations on how to pay it. Miranda warnings. Everybody should know on this one, they're Miranda rights, but I kind of go over this too. And your rights that you don't have to talk to the police, and when you do and you don't have to, but that's a very long conversation. But some of the most basic parts to it is I go over that you must be read. You have to be read your Miranda after you're arrested before questioning. So this is one of the things that we get a lot of people confused about. I've taken a lot of people to jail and they're like, you never read me Miranda. Now I'm going to get to go free. And I'm like, I didn't need to ask any questions. We had you on video and there was no doubt that you did this and you said you didn't want to talk to me. There was no reason for me to read your Miranda because I never asked you questions about the crime after I arrested you. That's when it comes in. Now, after I've arrested you too, I can also ask you questions, but not pertaining to anything to the charges that I have you under arrest for. I can ask you about other stuff. I can also ask you, without reading Miranda, your name, your date of birth, where you live, all those basic things we need for the report. They do not require Miranda. But if I'm going to ask you any questions about the offense that I have you under arrest for, Miranda has to be read first. And you have to consent to it, that you understand it, and that you're still willing to talk to the police. Yeah. And so juveniles, just a real quick thing too, because people had asked too, what happens to juveniles? So just if we arrest some juveniles, they will be taken to BPD for processing. So not the jail, they'll be taken to our station for processing, and they'll still have like fingerprints, photograph, and a bunch of information taken down on them. And then they'll usually be released to their parents. 95% of the time, released back to their guardian parents. Or if they score out, if they're kind of a habitual criminal and like, or they've got some really serious crimes with them, they could go to the JDC, the Juvenile Detention Center. For adults, though, they're going to the McLean County Jail. You might stop at BPD first for an interview or other kind of things we might have, especially like DUI, or if we've got you for a crime, we want to detectives want to interview you. But otherwise, we just take you straight to the jail. And at the jail, you'll be photographed, fingerprinted, searched, and then bond released. And obviously, some things will change here with the new laws that are kind of coming up here. So we're all just kind of waiting to see exactly how that's going to play out. Here too, something that I also tell officers too. It's like always try to, if I'm arresting somebody, especially on warrants, is letting them know how much their bond's going to be, giving them the option or the opportunity to call somebody first, so they're not like freaking out. Where'd my husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend go? And how do I get to them, so that they don't think that they're just lost? And so we'll do that. And then also tell them the bond amount, so they know how much money that they need to start putting together, and they can have their family members, friends start working on that to help them out. Try and again, reduce that anxiety so that they're not freaked out either. Also, if you are a victim of a crime, obviously this is just the most common sense, but again, I'm focusing this for more our immigrant population. If it's a serious crime and it just occurred, 911. If you're in immediate danger at all, any type of immediate danger, 911. Any other serious crime though, but it wasn't recent, like let's say you got jumped by some guys, you didn't report it at the time, and now it's either hours later or maybe the next day, don't call 911. You don't need to. It's not an emergency. Yeah, it's serious and it's bad, but it happened yesterday. Or like your house got broken into and you didn't, and you already went through it, nobody's there, and like you're like, oh, I guess we should probably call the police. Non-emergency. Yeah, it's like 911 is reserved for those very serious calls. And then complaint. If you want to file a citizen's complaint against a police officer, I walk through the entire process with them. So try and calmly to reserve it with the officer first, because I can't tell you how many times in my career, especially as a sergeant, where I've had those calls where it was a miscommunication. And it's like the people are just in the two, like whatever their personalities weren't jiving. And so then by the time I got to talk to them, like, oh, that's why this happened. That makes sense. I'm like, okay. And they leave and they don't need anything else. It was just, we got it resolved. But otherwise, if you have any issues whatsoever, either call the police department or go in person and ask to speak with their supervisor. Ideally, you're going to come in the same shift that officer works. And I'm just telling you this because logistically and for our side too, it just helps if we have the bosses, the sergeant lieutenants that actually supervise that officer. It makes it all easier for us. So we can go back and forth with them very directly. It'll just happen quicker and easier for everybody if you can do that. If you can't, don't worry about it. It's not too big a deal. But if it's still not resolved, then you can complete a citizen's complaint form. You can do this in paper or online on the City of Bloomington's website. Either City of Bloomington, or more directly our police website, but both of them have it. You can also get this because some people don't feel comfortable coming to the police department to complain about the police, understandably so. So you can also, the PSCRB, the Citizens Review Board, also has these copies. The NAACP does, and Not in Our Town all have these forms as well. So you can go to them and they can all assist you with filling this stuff out as well. We also have these available right now, only in 2 languages, but we have it in English and in Spanish. I'm sorry, 1 second here. The chief's sending me text. Oh, nothing it needs right now. Complaint options. You will be contacted then by us. After that all happens, you turn in your citizen's complaint. At some point, it will be reviewed by our Office of Professional Standards, which is like Internal Affairs. It's just a different name. The OPS. The only stipulate, and then so they'll let you know how it turned out and what the findings were of it all. I will tell you though, the only way we do not accept a complaint from someone is if they're intoxicated. If you come in drunk or high or something like that, we're going to send you home. You can make the complaint, but you just got to wait till you sober up. That's just more of a legality thing for anything else. On the flip side of that, this is something that's actually new. Since the chief got here, he wanted to make it very easy too for if citizens want to thank a police officer. You have a wonderful interaction with somebody, and I can't tell you as a supervisor how much I appreciate this, because having one of my officers get something in, it's one thing for me to tell them, hey, great job. I was watching one of your tapes or videos or something like that, and you did a wonderful job. I loved how you talked to this person here. Or reading the reports, like, man, you really did some great digging here, outside the box thinking. But it sounds so much better when it comes from a private citizen. When they call in and say, like we had one just the other day where, does anybody remember, I'm sure you probably all saw it, where a child died in the car crash just here recently, an infant. And in the DUI, the mother got arrested for DUI. Well, one of the first witnesses there on scene came up, and they just sent a letter into the chief, or an email into the chief, just saying how wonderful the officers were there, like that they were so kind to all the witnesses, professional. They did first aid. They actually got a heartbeat back on the child and breathing. But it was just too late, got life flight to Peoria and passed away. Unfortunately, it was just awful, but just loved the professionalism and the empathy and the kindness that the officers share there. And she was blown away by it in that very tough, tragic scene. We love hearing that stuff. And so the chief made it much easier to do this. You just go to our portal, click on that thank an officer, and it's really short. You just put your name, phone number, address, and then you can put in just a paragraph, like what happened, date and time, just so we can help identify. If you don't remember the officer's name, if you give us a date and time, location, we can figure that out. And then just think of it, it just goes into a file, and the chief sees every single one of these, and he loves it. And so it just helps us know who our officers are, and we're able to then go back to them and tell them, thank you. It's because we want to reward that good behavior, not just punish the bad. And so school resource officers, we're almost here at the end. The main purpose of the school resource officers, they follow the SRO triad, and that stands for informal counselor, mentor, and then lastly, law enforcement officer. And I talked to them about this before I put this on here too. They like really emphasize like that is our role here. We are really informal counselors and mentors first and very last law enforcement officer. They do everything they can to never put a child all the way through high school ever in handcuffs on school grounds unless it's absolutely necessary for safety. If they've had like, you know, kids with warrants and stuff, and they're whispering in their ears like, you missed your court date, it needs to get taken care of. I already called your mom. We're not gonna do anything here at school. I'm not gonna march you out and, you know, in front of everybody. As soon as school's over, you need to go right over to the courthouse, get that taken care of. And it's like, just, it's very trying to be kind. And just the way that the officer Wagehoff at Evans, who's the most senior one, put it to me, he's like, we're no longer really police officers. He's like, what I try to do is like, we're taught as cops to always handle things quickly, rapidly, and get it done right away. Here at the school, it's not. I'm here to help support all the teachers and the staff here. So when I get called in there, I'm like, what can I do to help you get what you need done? I'm not here to solve all your problems, which is what cops usually do. I'm here just to help you facilitate your classroom. They understand, so they have awesome relationships with the administration, the staff, and the students and the parents. And so when there was a lot of talk of, you know, whether it was defunding the police and removing school resource officers, post George Floyd especially, I reached out to Officer Wagehoff and was asking him about it. And he was like, you know, Kyle, I'm not really surprised at all that this comes up because around the country, so many departments are doing it terribly. Like Chicago at one point was rotating in patrol officers on a daily basis through the schools, a different cop every day in the schools, no relationships with anyone there. They didn't understand the process. He's like, you have to be wholly committed. It has to be the right kind of officers into this job. We do. So when some people did bring that up here at school board meetings, and they were immediately and overwhelmingly shut down by not just, you know, the government and the city and the police being on the side, it was the school board. It was the president, the principals, the teachers, the parents were like, no, you're not taking these cops out of our school. We love our school resource officers. But again, it's tenuous. You have to do it right. And so we also focus on the restorative justice model, which I'm sure every single person in this group is probably extremely familiar with. So it's focused entirely on rehabilitation through reconciliation with the victims in the community. And so some other common questions that pop up that I bring up, can you audio and video record the police? Yes, absolutely. In the state of Illinois, you can. The only caveat is you can't interfere with their work. So let's say, just for example, the real quick one I always give is that if there's a traffic stop and you walk up on it, it's like your friends in the traffic stop and you want to record it, you're not part in the car, you're walking by, you have to give like that buffer space where the police go. You can't be right over the cop's shoulder within like a few feet of them. They can't order you back. They're not going to take your phone and things like that, and that would be illegal. But they can order you at a certain distance away to give them safe operating space. But everybody in that car every single one of them can have their cell phones on and recording the entire thing. You're in your house, you're at something else, the cops are there, you can record them until it gets to a point where like, I need to put you under arrest. We can take your phone and we can put you under arrest and stop you from recording that point. But as long as all these other things being equal, yes, you can record the police. Will we contact ICE if they have contact with an undocumented person? If we, BPD, highly unlikely. And because of the Illinois Trust Act, they really shouldn't almost ever. Like ICE warrants are not valid in the state of Illinois, and it's not you may not, you shall not comply with an ICE warrant in the state of Illinois. And the only reason I say highly unlikely, because there's only been like 2 or 3 times I could think of in my 21 years, actually, even before the Illinois Trust Act, that we ever did actually contact ICE. And it was because we had arrested somebody who was like a homicide warrant, had like homicide or extreme, like high level drug dealer. And we found out they were an undocumented immigrant. And so it's like, some of it was like, it was better off that we just removed them from the entire country than it was going through the system on some of these things. But the jail has other kind of issues, but we at the BPD do not contact ICE. What if I don't speak English and I need to call? We do have Spanish speaking officers, but also this wonderful age of technology, Google Translate. I have used this myself a ton of times, and using it on the phone and communicate. It's tough when things are going real fast and need to happen right away, but just interviewing people, Google Translate on the phones, amazing. Other apps that they have too, but also calling 911 if you don't speak English. We do have contracts with a language line, and there's like, I can't remember, 50 plus languages that they have access to through this company that we hire, that once we can figure out what language you're speaking, we can hire them, and then within a minutes, they're on the line with us translating everything. So do not be afraid to call 911 if you don't speak English. And why are there another one is big one is why are there so many officers at a traffic stop sometimes? That's a big one we get a lot, where they think it's like overkill or we're just really trying to over intimidate people. But I can give you the main kind of ones is like DUI cars, you're gonna have multiple people there. If we're calling for a canine, so if I'm the officer and I pull somebody over, and let's say there's 3 people in the car and I'm calling for a canine, for me to be calling a canine, I can't be delaying that traffic stop anymore. So they want us to start writing that ticket right away as soon as we get back to the car and I'm calling for the dog. So I've got to be back here. It's great if I have a backup officer still watching the car, making sure they're not doing anything, hiding drugs, throwing drugs, eating drugs, or getting guns or whatever. They're watching the car. So that's already 2 officers. If there's 3 people in the car, I'd feel better because we're gonna have to pull them all out for a canine sniff. I'd want at least 2 officers watching those officers while I'm still in the car writing the ticket. That's 3 cars plus the dog, 4. So it's like sometimes you see that it's not like we're doing some big nefarious thing. It's just this is what we actually need for the stop. Sometimes too, it looks like multiple officers because we're training. And so it might have 1 officer who's there, another one who's training, and then you got 2 training ones. You got 4 officers there for 1 minor call. It's because you have 2 officers really. The other 2 are just in training. So it's not always as bad as it seems. Another one we get frequently is why do police follow us so long before actually lighting me up for a traffic stop? Usually we're developing probable cause, especially if it's a DUI. They're going to follow them for quite a while and see if they can get them doing multiple infractions as long as nobody else is really in danger. They'll wait to see if like, okay, they just stop past the stoplight. Now they're at a green light and they haven't lawn for like 5 seconds and just doing all these things that might follow them for a little while. Another one is we're running the plates. We're trying to multitask and follow and watch things on, and we're waiting for the returns to come back. And it's like, well, that might not be the right car. Is that right? Comes back on a different car because somebody may have switched the plates. There's all kinds of different things. Sometimes we're waiting for backup. Like we had one the other day, and it's like we knew we had a felony warrant. Somebody had a $100,000 warrant in the car, and so they're waiting for at least 1 other officer to get there with them because there's a good likelihood that person's going to take off in jet and run out of the car, or maybe fight with us. So we want to have extra backup there to keep that going. Some of those things apply. That's the end of the presentation. That's weird. It usually, hang on. Nope, that was it. That was the end of the presentation. And like I said, it's the fast and dirty. Any comments, I highly recommend send to me. If you, I can give you my email though too. I can put that in the, or if, well, you want to put my email in the comment section in the chat there. I don't see my chat there popping up anymore.
Quit sharing. I think you stopped sharing.
Okay.
And then we had a full screen.
Not
Everybody pop back on.
It won't let me even pull that screen back up.
Let me see here. Okay, I think I can do it.
Okay.
There we go. There we
I'll
go.
put my email and a phone number in the chat. And then if anybody has anything, they can absolutely please let me know.
I will. I just want to thank you, Sergeant Nowers, for this awesome presentation. It was awesome. It was something I think that we needed to as an organization and as a community. I know sometimes, you know, when people get stopped or have liberty about police, they don't know the full questions about what's going on. And I let people know all the time is that, you know, even with the McLean County Reentry Council and the things we're doing in the community, we're not coming in to try to stop an arrest or stop a crime or anything what the police are trying to do. All we're trying to do is keep people free if we can to do the things that we're trying to do so they can do in the community. I never forget when I got invited to your office. I've been to the Bloomington Police Department many times for a meeting upstairs, but the last time that I went to talk directly to the police station was 20-some years ago when I was doing stupid in the community. So it felt real good to build that relationship and continue to build that relationship. So that being said, does anybody have any questions for Sergeant Nowers about the presentation or anything?
Sergeant Nowers, I do want to say that I'm really glad that you got on here today and gave this presentation. I think one of the things that as the McLean County Reentry Council, when we're speaking of people re-entering the community, I think a disconnect is people that have been incarcerated confuse police officers with correctional officers. When you've been in prison, sometimes you don't always come across the best correctional officers, but they're the officers, they're the authority. And then when you come home, you kind of associate police officers with correctional officers, and you kind of put them in that same category. And so I think it's very, very important that, maybe that those kinds of things are discussed, and people that re-enter into the community are able to understand the difference between correctional officers and police officers. Though there's sometimes maybe not be a huge difference, there definitely can be in their conduct. And I think this is great. I think people have to understand that you guys are just regular men and women on this earth that are doing their job and serving out their purpose. And, it's great to see that the Bloomington PD has a resource officer. And, just the simple fact that, you've been on the force for 21 years. I've been in federal and state prison, but, last week we were just two dads sitting next to each other in lawn chairs watching our daughters play softball. You guys are regular human beings, and you're just doing your job. And we commend you and we thank you for it.
I think Candace has a question.
Yeah, hi. First, thank you. That was great. Officer Nowers, very amazing and very informative presentation. So my first question is, can we reach out to you, contact if we would like to have a presentation done somewhere or want to create something?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I've been in touch. I've talked with you about this a little bit before, and then also with Kara as well for Labyrinth House. I think is a perfect place to bring the presentation to for people who, are recently incarcerated and trying to get reacclimated, just to reduce that fear. So just reach out to me. We're going to work out and setting up dates and times. My schedule fills up, but if it's later than 2 weeks out, I usually have a pretty good chance, because it seems like in 2-week increments I start filling up really fast.
Okay.
But at post that, if you give me at least 2 weeks notice, I guarantee we can make it happen.
Okay, perfect. And then my second question is, with the not the de-escalation training that you do, but the community engagement, is there any not necessarily requirement, but for the rest of the officers, do they ever get an opportunity? Is it volunteer that they can do it? Is it rotating, or is there just one committee of a group of folks that only do it?
Ideally, and this is from both me and the chief, it becomes a whole department thing. And so he's always voiced that to me too. It's how do we get more officers involved? Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've told him is one, just be a little patient. Because we're talking about wholesale culture change to some degree. We've never, in my 20 years prior to this, had anything close to this kind of community engagement attempt and effort. And so the chief's not a patient guy, though. It's he wants to just constant push, and which is great. It's one of the good things, but it's always very positive pushing. But so he's doing everything he can to then reward those officers who do show up at these things. So he wants to see more and more. And I always let all the officers know too, he asks me every time who showed up, who's going there. And when they do, and I'm starting to see too, we've gotten a few people that just recently got promoted. They're all people who showed up at our events. And it's take notice, guys. Guys and girls. It's if you want to go anywhere in this department, you do these things that he's wanting and start making an impact on the community. And so, and I'm trying to get more too. It's I know I'm the one that's the chief, and I are kind of more of the faces, but it's I'm trying to get more and more things where I can take pictures of other officers and have them out there on our Facebook too. And if you haven't followed us on Facebook, it's probably not the top of the list for a lot of people in reentry council type things. You'd be shocked. It's you will see a lot of our community engagement stuff that we do or about to do. But then, and so you see the great work that the positive stuff that we're doing, but it's also a great fact-finding information source. We put out a ton of the transparency of a big push of this chief, of the crime that's actually going on in this town, or things that you need to be aware of and be safe for. You will see it coming more than we ever did before he got here. So it's a great source of information, but also there's a lot of feel-good stuff in it with all the community engagement that we are doing.
Definitely agree. So, okay, so I'm taking it, you can't make it quite in a requirement, but you're working on it. Okay, fair.
And so, yeah, we're trying, and you don't want it to be really, it's like, if you have, and I told him that some things he will have to voluntold, some people volunteer some people to go to some things. But once they do, like I always tell everybody in my department, my job, I seek out people who hate the police. That's one of my primary groups that I try to reach out to. And I told them I would never send them to any of those groups. That's my job. I love it and I have a passion for it, but it's like, I would never send you somewhere precarious where the crowd's going to be upset and mad at you. But after I do reach out to these groups and I start building that trust with them, you're going to have to come here with me too. It can't just be me, the only person that they see and trust. And they need to see it's the rest of the department. So like, I'll give you a heads up, like, hey, these people are on the trust bubble. They're not quite there yet, but they're hoping. They're reaching out their hand and giving an effort for BPD to prove themselves. So put on your A game for me. And they appreciate that. And then they will. It's like, and so they're going to a lot of these events, and every single officer I've had go to these events, especially like these block parties we go to and other things. And they're like, that was actually a lot of fun. I had no idea. Like they're expecting, especially post Ferguson, post George Floyd, a lot of these officers, they haven't, it's just no fault of their own. They've grown up very homogenous and they haven't had a lot of African-American friends, Hispanic friends, Muslim, Jewish friends. And so when they go to some of these events, it's the first time they've ever been around people in a non-police facility or in environment. And so when they go and they're just going off of what they're seeing on social media, these people hate us. No, they don't. And then they go there and like, people wanted to take pictures of me, but a couple people hugged me. And it's like, yeah, these are all wonderful people and they just want you to protect them and treat them well. And then, so all of a sudden, then you start seeing more and more people showing up. So bit by bit.
That is actually good and comforting to hear. So I hope that works out. And I don't want to take up all the questions, but my last important one is when the juvenile process, just a personal request, is it okay, like to have every officer understand where juveniles are when they are taken and what the process is? We had a very scary situation. You and I kind of talked about that. And it didn't seem like none of the officers on the scene were able to explain like where that juvenile was until I like had to drive to different places myself, and then she was actually picked up.
You mean telling the family and friends where the juvenile is?
Yeah, the person that like on the scene, they're like, where are you taking them? They didn't know, where did she go? Where did that person go? They didn't know.
No, that should be practiced. Yeah, and that could have been, there's some sort of confusion, but absolutely, that's something that should always be done. If we're taking like I said, I try to do that even for adults, but juveniles, that shouldn't even be in question. That, if there's family, loved ones, friends there, some type of guardian, we should never be taking juveniles without those people being in the know and what comes next. And that's usually what we always try to always give, like, here's what's going to happen. You're probably about an hour from now, we're going to be calling you to come down the station to come pick them up. And if sometimes they don't have vehicles or things like that, then we'll bring them back to those people. But ideally we have it there. So we have the meeting there. We can all talk about what's happened and hopefully everything's are calmed down. But no, I can't even imagine the anxiety that would cause if somebody didn't know and the police took off with their kids and they had no idea where they're at. So yeah, no, that is absolutely not ideal and not the status quo. So yes, I completely empathize with that.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Cecilia? Thank you, Candace.
Yeah, thank you for your questions, Candace. I appreciate those as well. Yeah, Sergeant Nowers, I really appreciate your persistent effort to try to continue to kind of gauge the, minimize the gap that we see in our communities and the relationship that our folks have with the police. So kind of along those lines, and this might be just like a longer conversation, but I'm kind of curious if there's been conversations about re-education with police officers. It sounds like, you recognize there's culture change takes a really long time and a lot of exposure to things that are different and people don't always have that. The example I'm thinking of is just like, I used to live on Market Street, and every single day seeing people getting pulled over just looks like because they're getting targeted because they have a vehicle that's a little banged up, or they've got a full load of laundry. Like it just seems like, or like a guy on a bike and there's 4 police cars coming up and rushing him. So just like around like re-education for like targeted areas in the community. And you had mentioned probable cause in the beginning of the presentation. Just on the other end, like if you do any efforts to re-educate or educate communities that are targeted by the police, what their rights are. So yeah, I know that's a twofold question if it takes too long to answer, but just things that I feel like I often have seen in the work that I've been involved with, and people just really struggling still with their relationship with the police.
Yeah, no, fantastic point, Cecilia. One of them is to say it's always tough to know exactly why each stop is always different. Sometimes there's 4 officers there on a guy on a bike because we're actually doing a drug sting or something, and it's like, and then that person just sold like cocaine to somebody just down the street. Sometimes it's not, and so I can't always do. Sometimes it might be unfair, but most of the times, vast majority, there's probably just a little bit more going on than you know about. A lot of times, and this is one of the most frustrating things too that we've always had. So it's also re-educating the public, where we've had, like, I can't tell you how many calls I've had. Dispatch call, and dispatch has to put out, is by policy, they have to put out everything on a call they get in. And I can't tell you how many calls I've had come in that I've had to cancel as a sergeant or as an officer myself. Like, boss, I don't think this is right. Is somebody will call in like, yeah, I have a suspicious black male walking down the street on here. And it's like, there's no other call. It's late at night and there's a black guy walking down the street. As a sergeant, I'm you're not going to that call, dispatch. You can call that caller back. If they've got something more, we'll go to it. And I tell the officer, like, drive by. If you see something suspicious, by all means do so, because maybe a caller just couldn't articulate it. But it's like, if that's all you've got is just a black man on the street, you will drive on by. We are not getting out on people. I'm like, oh, you look suspicious, and having absolutely no. But tons of those calls have kind of come in. And so that just sets up everybody for just a terrible situation that victimizes the person, the guy who's getting stopped. It victimizes the officer. He gets thrown into a terrible situation and trying to do their job, but it's like, doesn't have all the information or bad information. And you might just have, literally, it might just be a racist caller. And so it's, and on the other side, re-educating the officers is absolutely part of something that I've been trying to work on. And so, like I said, I teach de-escalation for citizens, private citizens. That all starts, although I also teach de-escalation for officers. And one of the nice things, for the last several years, I've been able to teach every single officer right after they got out of the academy. And so my de-escalation class is actually, it was like 7 hours long. And the cornerstone of it is empathy. But it's also just it's like trying to figure out, and I mentioned, like, trying to put yourself out of your cop bubble and out of your, typically, because the vast majority of who we hire, white male bubble as well. Imagine what it's like to be a woman who's a victim of sexual assault or domestic violence. Imagine what it's like to be a black man in an almost all white society. Imagine being a black man with the history of law enforcement in this country. A lot of them don't know the history of law enforcement in this country, which is very sad. I've run across 2 officers that had never seen photographs or videos from the civil rights era of them getting attacked by police with dogs and fire hoses. I don't know how that's possible, but it's true. So we absolutely have problems in this country with education and getting them. And that's part of what this community engagement side that I really try to do as well, not just through those classes there, but it's exposure to these other cultures and groups and getting as many officers as I can in friendly situations. So it's not them. So they start having some true empathy, not just something they're learning in the classroom or from me, from another hopefully credible source, but they see it with their own eyes and meet people with their shaking those hands, and like meeting people does more than anything does. And so it's like, I try to create as many of these events as I possibly can and trying to get as many young new officers as I can to come to these things, but it's a never ending process.
Hey, was that it, Celia? Okay, Georgine?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hello, Sergeant. How are you?
Georgine, great to see you again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I have a question. When you guys put up those camera things that's on wheels,
Yes.
what is the thinking process for the location they're putting those at?
Yeah.
Because there's one here, I'm sorry, it's a 2-part. It's one here at the corner of Urban and Tracy. We haven't had any incidents that I know of that warrant that. And then we have people that's trying to buy these condos and they like, oh, why is that there? And I have no answer. And I stopped the officer when he was driving through and he said, oh, we do it all the time. I said, no, you don't. And so he couldn't help me. And I do know Joy Care is right here at that corner,
Yeah.
the reentry program. And so I know they're in that building, in that one building. So is it because of that?
I wouldn't think so. I'm not exactly sure why that one's there. I know last year we definitely had a lot of issues on Tracy, but as far as
Yeah.
I would notice, and this year's been very quiet on Tracy Drive. So I could dig in a
Exactly.
little bit and find out why that one's there now. I know like we have one right now on Bandicon Way, and that was at the request of the community there too, and because we had a shooting there just recently. We put one on Rainbow too when we had a shooting right over there not too long ago. We try to kind of normally the thinking is hotspots. If we do have some spots or locations where we've seen an uptick, especially in violent crime, and or sometimes it's catalytic. For a while it was those catalytic converter thefts. We were trying to predict where those might be, and it was almost, those ones are overt though. So I mean, it's not, there's covert and overt. These are very overt. We want to hopefully reduce crime because people are seeing the cameras are there and they're like, we're not coming here. But you're absolutely right, and I completely understand now too. It can also paint an image though. Things might be bad here. Do we want to come here and live here? Is it so bad that the police need to have a 24-hour surveillance camera here? And so it's a tricky balance, because like Bandicon Way right now, like, okay, we've gone 2 weeks now. Can you guys remove those cameras? Because again, so just like you're thinking, like we wanted them at first, but it's quiet down. We haven't had any issues since. Can you take them away? Because now it looks like it might be something bad here. But could you move it to Clearwater Park? Because we're still having problems out there. So it's like, so that's kind of the thinking of where we do it. It's usually at the request of someone in the community, and sometimes from our intel analysts who are telling us where hotspots are. But I'm not sure
Okay,
about,
because I
I
thought,
have not heard anything on Tracy for a while. Yeah.
right, we haven't. It's been